Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with Riot Kent, and after a long week at the office, we are back for another Patch Post Mortem where we talk about what worked and what didn't, and all the reasons why Reddit hates us this week. So yeah, Kent, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Ready to talk about all the reasons why Reddit hates us. It's always fun.
Yeah, so this patch wasn't, there was no like major events on this patch, but this was like us starting to really get ready for the Worlds patch, which is next patch. 12-7 is when the championship will be played on. So that'll be kind of interesting. So, but generally just some changes here and there, and then we had the B patch to talk about. So yeah,
All right, all of this kind of helps get us closer to what we want for the World's patch as balanced as possible. So,
yep,
yeah, a lot to go over.
yeah. All right, well, let's jump into it, and I think we'll talk about general themes as we go. But since there's a lot with the B patch, let's dive right in. So augment choices to fix a bug. Again, we usually don't talk about bug fixes too much. We fixed a bug. Sweet. Electrocharge and Luden now have scaling. This is an interesting one. I think, power-wise, we can say Electrocharge still ended up a bit weak. But the functionality this introduces, I think, has longer-term ramifications for the augment system, which is that, we can have things that aren't just flat or percent. We can have flat scaling on augments. It does add to the complexity, but I think basically from a player expectation standpoint, it's like if you take Electrocharge, it's going to proc and the damage goes up over time. Seems fine. So I will say I'm pretty happy with this execution, and I think we'll probably end up using it more on augments as we ship more augments in the future. But yeah, Electrocharge I think ended up a little underpowered.
Yeah, I think basically like this is really good because it lets you like when you want to build the electrocharge strategy and have your tanks deal damage outwards with this augment, like you can really cement that in. It's not just an early game augment that like falls off late game, and that's why how a lot of players ended up playing it in the beginning of the set. So really happy that now it's just like it's an actual strategy that you can play towards. That being said, I think the fact that you can still get electrocharge offered on the third augment was kind of a miss because we changed it to like a fall off kind of thing, um, not away from the fall off thing and into like a general full on strategy. Like it's too late on 4-6 to pivot into this electrocharge strategy, and so that should have been something that we probably addressed there.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, Innovator Heart moving to gold. This breaks a massive paradigm because it was the first heart. Like when we shipped, it was all hearts are tier 1. And then we tried moving this one to gold. And I think this opens up a can of worms that needed to be opened. And, it's funny, I was just writing the learnings article today, and I talk about this a bit in there. But basically, some of our preconceived notions of like what the rules are going to be are just not going to cut it, right? Like if we want to have hearts and souls and things like that, they might have to be different tiers. They're not the same power level. All traits are not the same.
Yeah, and there's like confusion to solve, like a problem to solve there too. Of like, why are some of the hearts here and some of the emblems there? I think we can get to a point where like it makes a lot of sense. At first, we made them all the same for like easy to understand reasons. But now that we're like more open to like making these changes, I think we'll get to a way better balance state, and we just have a separate problem to solve of like, how to can get players to understand that like not all hearts are the same and not all crests are the same.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, right? Is like we traded learnability of the system for balance, and those are a trade-off, right? I mean, if a new player started today and they're like, "Why is this heart gold but this heart silver?" And it's funny because you
Yeah,
could be
exactly.
like, or yeah, but it's funny because if you could be like, well, why didn't you just make this one an emblem? That way it matched other conventions. But as you'll see in the patch rundown tomorrow, it doesn't even like work in some cases as well. So, and that's the thing. I think we're gonna have to break these conventions more often.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Innovator Soul. This is another one that I think we wouldn't have acted on unless it's the Worlds patch, but it does raise some further questions about the augment system, which is basically this augment was just too powerful for a prismatic, even though it's a soul, just like every other soul, but the power of going from 5 to 7 Innovator on a single augment was just too big, the way the trait was designed. And again, our framework for this has always been, would we be okay if the world's champion was decided by this augment appearing? And for this, the answer was no, we wouldn't. We don't want the worlds decided by the fact that somebody got Innovator Soul at 4/6. Like, that's just not what we're looking for. So we ended up removing it.
Yeah, and I actually, like, it's sad because it takes away from that, like, fantasy of, you know, if you hit like Innovator Heart and Innovator Soul, holy crap, you have +3 innovators. But I think I generally, like, I liked that we removed this. I think this was a good change, because hitting Innovator 7 is still, like, super exciting. Like, holy crap, I have a dragon and this thing is, like, really strong. So, like, instead of nerfing the dragon, we took this away, just removed the ceiling of the comp, and it seemed to work. So
share the spotlight. This is one of the changes that we'd locked in before we had realized there was the bug with Socialite. And so we ended up not being able to revert this in time. So because of that, this ended up being kind of a mistake. I think share the spotlight now is, like, not really at its prismatic power. It's not really performing that well. Now, that being said, I do think a meta shift could easily push it back as Socialite becomes more powerful. I'm not sure that the answer is just, like, revert it, because it is a very powerful augment at 125, but this ended up being a mistake, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that this change made it so that, like, all hexes are 100%. It's very clear exactly what it does. That, like, I agree with you that, like, we locked this in early, and so it fell off a lot. But I think that this is more of saying that, like, Socialite isn't really being played that much right now. And so, like, once Socialite gets into a good spot, this augment will be the appropriate amount of power.
Yeah, that was definitely one of those confusing points too, where people didn't realize the middle hex was still 100. You know, so
total, yeah, it's
all
very
right.
confusing.
Yeah, so small being gold. So this one's both a hit and a miss. I think it was a hit to move it up to gold. And you and I have been having discussions at the office how augments that power up a trait at tier 1 are probably pretty questionable, and so this gets that into that tier 2 space, which I think is good. That being said, I think 30% dodge actually ended up being a bit of an overshoot, and it still kind of presents me with this problem, which I still have, which is the gap between Yordles without this augment and the gap with Yordles with this augment is still too wide, and so I actually think we should have just made it silver gold and called it a day.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure about that, but, like, it's possible. Because, like, at gold, there's definitely more room to move away from the base trait, which is why I think a lot of these, like, trait augments are healthier at gold. But yeah, could be right. I think ultimately, though, the big move from, like, silver to gold was correct.
Yep. Obviously, shrinking the Yordles, that was the real S tier change.
Yes, very important change.
Nice. Okay, Enforcer. So this is the kind of change that I think we hate to make as a design team, which is we made it because Enforcer just wasn't fun. And I think everyone has kind of called us out as, like, this trait's basically a dead trait now. And it's like, yeah, kinda, to be honest. It kinda is. But the alternative, which was 3-cost 3-star carries are invalid because everyone gets 2 Enforcer for free, was not an acceptable outcome. Now, the nice thing is we're still seeing 3 Enforcer be ran. I think the one thing we could have done differently, maybe, is that now that the trait requires much more investment, instead of buffing it to 4 seconds, we could have actually just had the 3-piece Enforcer hit the 2 targets it used to, both for 3 seconds. That might have been more the correct play. But again, I still think it was necessary to make the change to a 3-piece, especially because of Vi and Sejuani existing in the same set, or even late game Vi and Jace. It's not just the Bruiser thing. But like I said, I know that there are some players definitely sad about this.
Yeah. Like you said, it's like one of those changes that we don't like to make. It's pretty sad that we have to, like, do this to a trait. But ultimately, like, it's good that, like, you have to kind of think about activating Enforcer now rather than, like, it just comes to you, because these 2 units are both good units and they just give you this trait for free that punishes the enemy. But yeah, I kind of agree. It's like, it's not an exciting trait anymore. So iffy about the change. Like, I'm glad we made the change, but also sad about it.
Yep. Hextech. This is another good and bad. Direction, awesome. I actually love this change. I think the thematics of, like, it scaling up, again, it fixes our flat number problem. I think more and more we're going to have to figure out a clearer way to, like, shorten our tooltips, but still have this be a thing where anytime we want to use a flat number. I know there's a trait in set 7 we've been talking about that, like, has this exact same issue where it's just like, flat numbers, oh boy, how are we going to fix this? But let's change it to percent. You know, this is the same problem we've been experiencing forever. But obviously the miss here is we overshot a little bit. I think for a while, 6 Hextech Sivir ended up being one of the much more dominant strats on the first half of this patch. So it was pretty clear we overshot the number a bit.
Yeah, it was like we saw the performance of Hextech in the previous patch, and it was like terrible. It's like non-existent kind of comp, and so it's like we need to buff the comp and also give it this power. But it turns out that like giving it this kind of scaling power gave it a lot of the comp in general, a lot of momentum, like tempo that led to way more power already, and so we didn't really need to buff the trait as much as we ended up buffing it. So that was a mistake.
Yep. Okay, the AD reduction. Now, before we talk about this one, I want to make it real clear because I have a little bit of bias. This one, if you perceive this as a bad change, you can blame me. This was one of the Mort specials where I think I came in that Monday morning and I was like, "Hey team, I really think we need to do this," and we had like a day and a half to test it, and we made this change. So under that context, because again, I admit some bias here, Ken, why don't you go first and tell me how you think this played out?
So ultimately, I think this like worked. We don't have as much like explosiveness as we did in the past, but at the same time, I think it's more just that like this change was good. We should have also done other things, such as like AP kind of as expected, like Arcanist became really powerful, and we should have probably preemptively touched that. Yeah, and things like that, where like basically we should have preemptively done other things to also control their power levels in the meta.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that statement. It's interesting. Everyone likes to call out the Arcanist one, and I think that's somewhat fair. But generally, what I would call out is like just in general the very defensive, tanky beasts in the game. The obviously the common one that we haven't talked about much yet is Warwick and Chemtech. We saw plenty of Chemtech videos where it's like now without some of this extra burst, the Chemtech champions survive, and Warwick, especially as a frontliner, just teams didn't have the oomph to take down that Warwick. And so I think this led to kind of like, it was funny because this change was meant to be a pretty significant nerf to things like Warwick and Twitch, right? It's like a 16 AD nerf to both of them, but because they were Chemtech, it ended up being actually a buff. So to your point, yeah, that's kind of where I feel like it's like directionally this was correct, but without all the other changes, it ended up being a miss,
Yep.
As far as numbers go, I think Senna in here, I think we hit a little too hard. That's the one looking through these numbers that feels like that was not quite correct. Talon, interestingly enough, I know you and I debate this one all the time, but I actually think Talon we could have gone harder. I know a 40 AD assassin feels a little weird, but like there's so much power in that spell, and I'm a little sad we had to nerf the spell later in the B patch. I really don't like his damage being in his autos. It just feels really weird. And then other than that, like Kha'Zix might have been the only other one that's just like, did he really need the nerf? But overall though, like I said, generally correct, but not enough, and not enough without all the other stuff. So
Yeah, agreed.
cool. All right, Caitlyn attack speed. I think this was a good change to help buff the Enforcer and buff her lack of AD. I don't think it changed much, so it's a nice, safe change. Caitlyn's still a good early champion. I've seen people use her to get through entire stage 2 and 3, so, like, cool. And it didn't make 3-star Caitlyn somehow dominating the game, so mission accomplished.
Yep.
Okay, Quinn nerf. Let's talk about the Quinn nerf and the Warwick nerf. I think this is the quintessential example of the balance thrashing discussion, right? Remember early on we talked about, are we going to balance thrash this set? And I think people looked at this Quinn and Warwick change, and there were a lot of people that were like, okay, this is going to make Quinn and Warwick not a dominant comp. And the reality is they were still quite dominant, for a bunch of reasons like the AD change and stuff like that. And it does we're seeing the other side of the coin, right? Like in past sets, we've over-nerfed, and it's like, I used to play Warwick, now that comp is D tier. Now we're in the, I used to play against Warwick, and I want him nerfed. And he got nerfed, but it's still dominant. This is not fun. And so kind of pick your poison, no matter what we seem to do. It seems to not be great. But what I'll say, this specific change, the Quinn change was correct. The Quinn nerf was good, solid. The Warwick change was not enough. His healing is still a massive amount of healing. I don't think this was enough. But there you go.
Yeah, I think also like the healing matters, but we also nerfed all damage, and so Warwick ended up still being better than we had expected. On this also, like, I think the Quinn nerf was like super on point actually. Like Quinn really needed the nerf, and the damage was kind of just like free damage. No one really thought about it, but that thing hit hard.
Yep.
And so I was kind of surprised to see that like a lot of people were like, they just nerfed Quinn, like got gutted for Warwick's sins or something like that. And it was like, no, Quinn was a huge part of this comp. Quinn was stalled for so long, and then Warwick ramps up and runs you over, and like all the challenger players kind of agreed that like Quinn is a beast and we need to nerf Quinn. And so, we went with that direction. I think that one was really good. I think ultimately we should have read the Warwick one a little bit better, where like, Chemtech and like nerf the healing, but he still has Chemtech and he still has like decently high healing. He's still going to be a monster. And so we could have probably tuned down his DPS also.
Yep. Swain, this is an interesting one because before this, I would have attested that Swain was literally the worst champion in the set. It's like he exists, but you're never excited to play him.
Well, so does Second Wind, and you don't like Second Wind, but I think that's a good augment. So
wow, way to throw the Second Wind at me. I see what you're doing. No, but I mean, like, Swain wasn't great. Like, he was certainly, even if you called him like fine, he was never a star. This change was light. This was a very light change, and he became quite good. You get a Swain 2 at like 2-1 or 2-2, and you are strong. I was actually a little shocked, to be honest with you, how much the 250 to 300 heal here made a massive difference. I think the crazy thing is, I'll say it, I think Swain is at the correct spot right now. I think he's exactly where he's supposed to be. He's good in the early game. If you have a Swain 2 at 2-2, cool. And he falls off late game. You're not like running a Swain 3 and it's not going to dominate the game. It's good. So I think Swain nailed it, actually.
I kind of agree. I think Swain is like in a really good spot, and like his 2-star drain tankiness is not only really fun to watch, like, oh my god, is he gonna heal to full? Holy crap, he healed to full. And it's like not only really at a really good spot where like that can happen, we're also at the point where, like, as you mentioned, he's not dominating late game like we had in set 6 with Imperial Swain wiping the entire board in one cast. Like, I'm glad we're not at that point either. So I think with these buffs, I think we got to a good spot too.
Yep. Okay, Malzahar, as always, painful had to nerf Malzahar, but again, gonna say it, nailed it. Like, this change seems really solid. Arcanist Malzahar was still really performing, doing well, but not overpowered. Malzahar 3 is still a functional champion. And you know what? Synaptic lobbies aren't torture now. Yep. Like, Synaptic lobbies are fine. It's like, yeah, this is good. If you get lucky and get, like, Blue Battery 2 in a Synaptic lobby, cool, you can make the old Malzahar again. Or, oh, Mutant Ari is still really good. But that was the point, right? Is like, Synaptic needed to have its high rolls, not just 3-2 level 6 roll down Mal's 2 blue buff C at the finish line, and this fixed that. So I'm calling this a fucking slam dunk.
Agree. I think this was on point, basically. Nerfed exactly what we wanted to nerf, and we left Malzahar in a good state where he can still be a viable strategy to play, which is really good.
Yep. Aurelia nerf. This one's hard because, it's interesting. Like, we're seeing Aurelia be good right now, but not as the primary carry, only as the secondary carry. But I will say that, like, I think for this champion, that might be the healthiest state she can be in. I think when she is the primary carry, it's like 3-item Aurelia, see you at the finish line because I reset and kill everything. She's so thresholdy. So this one's hard because definitely the first instinct when this patch came out was that we over-nerfed. It also didn't help that one of her strongest counters in Warwick was the dominating comp. But I think long term, this is where she's supposed to be. And like, I don't think we need to be buffing Aurelia anytime soon.
Yeah. So I thought it was going to be a spicy take, but I think Aurelia's in a great spot right now where like, not only can she be used as a supportive carry, like secondary carry, but as a primary carry, if you have the right situation for her, like, social Hex in the right spot, some augments, like good items, whatever, she can still be like a monster. And so that seems like a good spot for her. Might be like minorly off, like slightly tiny bit weak maybe, and like have more requirements to be the primary carry and like, the beast that she used to be. But I think she's in a good spot after these.
Yeah,
I think the one that we nailed really well, I think, is the max mana nerf. Actually, I was kind of afraid of that one, but like she's not just taking damage and casting healing to full like over and over again. It's slightly slower, and it's
if we had to buff her, it would be like 5 spell damage on the base or 5 base AD or something. It's certainly
Something
not
really
the
small.
mana change. It's certainly not that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Galio change. I'm going to actually call this useless. I think this change was pointless. I think this change... Oh, well, the one thing I'll say is I agree with the 1-star Galio stun duration, just so that 1-star Galio was a little more playable. But, like, we shifted the power in a way that didn't matter. It didn't really open up any unique builds. You'd still, like, mathematically speaking, as much fun as Warmog's Galio is in my Stompio comp I made, it's still you'd rather have a death cap than a Warmog's from a math perspective. And it's just like, I think this change was useless.
Yeah, so like, I mean, to be fair, the Warmogs gives you defensiveness also on top of damage. But like, yeah, I kind of agree. It's like these numbers were like tuned in kind of a way that's like not taking any risk. And with how bad Galio was, we could have probably taken a risk there and like made the percentage health number higher. So directionally good, just not enough. So.
Jace change, I'm gonna say nailed it. Jace is still a very strong endgame carry. You could make the argument that like now, at least right now on live after the B patch, that like Jhin is better than Jace maybe. But even if you made that argument, Jace gives his entire backline a bunch of attack speed. So I don't know. I'm calling this one a success.
Yeah, this is good too. Agree.
Yep. Silco, another success. The only failure here was that we did it too late, so it didn't get on the tooltip. But the fact that Silco 2 is now better than Silco 1, great. The fact that Silco 3 is now not an instant grief and like the hardest thing to win with, great. The explosion. I saw today, like Soju was streaming, he's like, oh, Silco 3 is a grief, and he forgot we did these changes. So like Silco 3 now is like actually pretty insane. So
yeah. Wipe the board.
Yeah. Zeri, this one is hilarious to me because if you remember when we did the patch preview and everyone was like, it's going to be a Zeri meta. It's going to be a Zeri meta. It's going to be a Zeri meta.
Yeah.
What I think a lot of people didn't realize is that this actually nerfed her starting attack speed quite a bit. Yep. And so it ended up actually being fine and like actually not enough. Like Zeri actually, which is crazy because don't get me wrong, I've seen some scary Zeris, like Zeri 2 with the right items, with the right build that can wreck stuff. But honestly, for a 5 cost, she's still a little underpowered. So when we talk about balance thrashing, I'll say we nailed this because it's like we didn't like all of a sudden make a Zeri meta, but she's still like much weaker than the other 5 costs.
Yeah, I think we were kind of afraid of like her ceiling, which even right now her ceiling can get really wild. Yeah. But like it's pretty hard to get there, and she's like a 5 cost, and so like I think we were afraid of doing that, so we preemptively nerfed her bonus attack hit damage. We maybe could have like just left that, and she might have been okay, or like adjusted something else basically, where like maybe we give her more attack speed or something like that, so that she is can ramp up to that like super exciting zoom around state a little faster. Yep. But like because I think ultimately she landed weak for the patch, which is sad because we know how exciting she can be. So.
Yep. Yeah, that being said, like I said, I've gotten my ass kicked by some 7 Debonair Zeri high rolls with like perfect items. So it's not like she's bad. It's just Zeri 1 especially kind of gets knocked over pretty easily.
Yeah, the cap is still there. Like if you can get to that cap, that Zeri is a scary carry. So
okay, Edge of Night. This is one. Okay, look, I'm gonna say we nailed it, but I'm also gonna give ourselves flack that it took us this long. The fact that this like can't attack while in stealth thing existed as long as it did. That's a massive miss. I'm not happy that was the state it was in. But all that aside, Edge of Night is actually now a very good, balanced, powerful item that has ended up a much healthier and better replacement for GA, finally. And so, like, if I look back at, like, GA to today, sick. Nailed it, Like, happy with where it is.
I agree. I think we kind of anchored in the beginning of, like, this is how stealth works in our game, and we didn't, like... if you attack and you break out of stealth, that's kind of how it works in the League engine. But like, we found a way to make it work, and we should have just like gone with something like this to begin with because it makes a lot more sense for a game like TFT.
Yep. Small changes. Component grab bag can no longer grant 3 of the same components. Great. That's just positive. Cybernetic shell granting less armor. Yep. Good change.
Okay, wait. On component grab bag, positive, but also kind of sad because it's kind of fun when you get like sometimes some things you're not sad about getting 3
All
of,
right,
and then
all
you
right.
can't take away.
Reddit. Okay, every redditor right now that's going, I got 3 cloaks from component grab bag. Just remember that it was Kent that said it was fun, not me this time.
Yeah, it's because like this was okay. To be fair, you can give me hate for this, all whatever, but like this was an active decision from the beginning. It was like I can put this rule in the very beginning, but it's like, but what if you get 3 rods and you're playing it? Like, that's so hype, or you get like thieves gloves, whatever it is. But totally understand that, like, sometimes you just have already 2 bows and you get 3 more bows and you're like, fuck this game, I'm never gonna play this game again. This game sucks, whatever. So like, yeah, I understand. Basically, I think it takes away some of like the hype moments, but at the same time, it takes away a lot of like the really bad moments, and I think that's really important.
It takes away some of the hype moments, but it certainly makes for some good TFT clips.
Yes.
Becca gets Mortdogged by this augment.
Oh yeah,
there's your clickbait. So
yep. We've seen a lot of those. It's like, oh, Keen has a last whisper, and then he takes item grab bag 2, gets 2 more last whispers.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Cybernetic shell, good change. Golden egg, good change. We got rid of the bad outcome and made it not as bad. Good.
Yep.
Golden ticket, fine change, didn't move the needle enough.
Which is shocking, but yes.
But again, this is the balance thrashing, right? You don't want to accidentally overbuff it and turn golden ticket into the best augment in the game. So
totally, yes.
High-end shopping, safe change. Probably could have gone for it, but again, balance thrashing, good change.
Yep.
Lifelong learning. I think this augment is finally probably about as healthy as it's ever going to get. I think offering it on 3-3 is still silly. But I think if you get it on 1-4, there are definitely scholar comps and Syndra comps that work really well. So cool. So.
Yeah, I think part of the like poor performance of this is just like scholars have been kind of struggling, but like there are some times where you can make this work, and so like that's still really good. But now that just becomes even better. So,
yep. Rich get richer. This is what we would call a necessary evil. I think in order to get it up to the power of other gold augments, this is a correct change. But you and I have been talking about we've clearly got some augment power creep, and long term, this is going to have to come back down someday.
Yep.
So.
Mort and I have been having conversations about like the future of augments, kind of the frameworks around it, and so one of the things is how did Rich get richer get to 14?
Yep.
So gonna start thinking about that further for the future.
Yep. Okay. Sharpshooter, man, remember when this augment was 40%?
Oh my! I think it was like 33% when we first started, or something like that. It's wild.
I mean, let's be real. Back when it was that strong, most of the champions couldn't even use the damn thing. So it's clearly changed.
A lot of the sharpshooters back then in set 6 didn't have spells that bounced, and so that kind of helped with it.
Yeah, but this thing is still strong, and you're going to see it in the patch rundown. It's still too strong. There's a world where honestly, like if the change we do next patch doesn't work, like B patch wise, you almost just want to delete it, because again, this is the like, do we want worlds to be decided because somebody got sharpshooter at 1-4? Not so much.
Yeah, unless we can identify like a specific culprit. Like if it's just like GP getting 2 gold off every ult, is maybe that's
sure, but I'm pretty sure that's not what's going on. It's more like
I know.
It's quirky, and it's just power. So
and I mean, it's like Lucian. It's kind of everyone. It's kind of all the twin shots. They all really want this augment. So
yeah. Smoke bomb. This. We keep touching smoke bomb, like expecting these numbers to do anything, and I'm pretty confident these numbers on smoke bomb actually don't do anything. It's just, do you need an aggro drop or not? Yes or no. So I know part of this is to like make the overlap with Edge of Night not as good, which that part's fine, except for the part where that you then take a bunch of damage and go down to the same threshold anyway.
Yep.
I don't know. I look at these numbers and I'm like, if smoke bomb needs a nerf, we need to like do something drastic or take it out, because this doesn't do anything to me.
Yeah, I mean, we have a different lever that we can adjust, which is like how much damage you take when you're dropping below the threshold.
Even that's it barely does much.
Yeah, it's just most of the power is loaded into the aggro drop, and so I mean, we also have a separate lever of like augment tier, so like we can technically do something like that, but yeah, I agree. Like this change doesn't really do much for the augment in terms of power levels.
Yep. Okay, Tiny Titans not being available on stage 4-6. So this is a rough one because I'm gonna call out the Esha situation. I don't know if you heard about this, but Game 6 OCE and the person that got second place and got to go to Worlds on Game 6 got a 4/6 Tiny Titans. Now, a lot of players then reached out and was like, see, Augment diff, Tiny Titans was the diff. Now, keep in mind, you could go look at all the other 6 games and all the other decisions that led up to that point and go, any of those could have also been the difference. But it was pretty clear that Tiny Titans at 4/6 created a lot of bad feels and was very powerful because that late in the game, boosting your HP, going from 20 to 55 was like, guess I top 4 just out of attrition. So in that case, I think this was the right change. And to be frank, I wish we'd done it a little earlier so that like regionals didn't have these kind of situations. But that being said, it also put Tiny Titans in a weird spot where like it was almost never good. So awkward.
Yep. And I think also making this change kind of aligns with the original design of this augment, which was more to be like, hey, I can gain a bunch of health and like not only zoom up the thing, but I can also like exceed 100 health and it's like super hype and I can do something with this, even though it like has obvious drawbacks of like you have lower pick on the carousel, but you are, now capable to like survive in the game longer. So like by basically making this change, we can do tuning to make it like fit within where it's supposed to show up.
Yep.
The miss was that we didn't do those tunings as we shipped the patch,
yep.
which was incorrect.
Yep. Titanic Force. So balance-wise, this change was correct. Fun-wise, this change sucks. Because now it's like, even when you get the fun, I don't know. I almost wish we'd gone like the other, like I'm the one who put this in, and I almost wish I'd gone the other direction where it's like prismatic and 3.5%. Because it's just, I don't know. Those big numbers are less fun now for sure.
Totally. Yeah, that's like a thing we kind of struggle with a lot where it's like once we nerf it too much, it's no longer exciting. And so we have to like try to pull on other levers. So it's like, but if you move it to prismatic, then it becomes so rare. But like maybe that's okay because you get this experience with like a rare experience with like this super fun augment or something like that. So yeah, it's always tough.
All right, Woodland Trinket Clone Health Buff. So the way I would describe this change is imagine you have a bullet hole in your chest. Like somebody shot you and you have a bullet hole. This change was like putting a Band-Aid on it. Like, great, thanks for the help. This augment has all the problems it has. And like, sure, we buffed it at 1.4 a bit, but it's still a buggy, messy, unclear, garbage dumpster fire. So
I thought you were going to say, like, you have a bullet hole in your chest, but then this is basically like saying, what if that bullet hole was smaller?
I mean, that's not bad either. It's like, it still sucks you have a bullet hole.
Yeah.
That's not bad either. So.
Yeah. Sad that this is how the augment turned out. I mean, it's just also just, like, too buggy and confusing for players to make use of what they want. It's like it doesn't do what players often expect it to do, and it happens a lot more. These kind of situations happen a lot more commonly with backline units, who you expect to be like the carry. So very sad that like just buffing it this way doesn't really solve the problem.
Yep. Okay, you're gonna laugh at me. I actually never checked on this one, but Mistral. We nerfed Mistral. Was this an over nerf? I actually didn't look this one up. This is actually the one I don't know. I know it was too strong, and Future Sight 2 was dominating, and it was like giving your team 20% attack speed and Future Sight was a little much. I actually never checked where it ended up.
I just looked it up, and it is at a still good. Like it is still strong.
Okay, so then calling it nailed it then. So great.
It was very necessary too because it was really good.
Yeah. All right, traits. Innovator. Debatable. I think the Innovator 3 change here was solid. It opened up the early game a little bit more. I think the Innovator 5 change was like, who gives a shit? Like, especially because we'd removed Innovator. Like, all the cases where Innovator Bear was truly, truly dominant were like gone with Innovator Soul gone and so many less hearts. So to me, that part was like kind of unnecessary, but I do think the 3 was actually correct here.
Yeah, I think the 3 change was really good. It helped the stage 2 boards get more diverse, but also I think we didn't really need to touch the bear here.
Yep. Ezreal change, I think this was good, especially now that we're seeing the scrap striker. Like, this is clearly good because that would have been even stronger. So seems like good change. Corki, good change. Champ's still really good. especially with ice cream cones. Apparently, I'm hearing so like still good.
Yeah. On this one, I'm a little sad that like we were gonna go further on the previous patch, and like we were going back and forth and kind of like chickened out and kind of went with the
But
260 revert.
this is the balance thrashing thing, right? It's like
Yeah.
we gotta go light touches, but that's the side effect is that it takes us 2 or 3 or 4 patches to get it to where it should be, and that's really challenging for us.
Yeah, and trying to get a good gauge of like how much is too much, and it's, getting learnings from all of these, but also it's pretty hard to gauge based on because like of so much movement too. But yeah, basically good change.
Rek'Sai, good change. It's fine. Rek'Sai's Rek'Sai. I think Rek'Sai is probably about where she should be.
Yep.
Sejuani, fine change. Great.
I think this was really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
For Sejuani, especially because she lost that
The enforcer,
power
Yep.
early on.
Yep. Small Vex nerf. Yep. Good. Not enough. Balance thrashing. Sweet. Good.
Yep.
Zach. So this is another example where I think this change was correct in context of Zach. It was incorrect in context of Chemtech getting buffed in the Warwick composition. So
Yes.
believe it or not, I think this actually made an impact to the Warwick comp.
Yes, Zach is like freakishly tanky, and so us nerfing all AD and then like buffing basically that making Warwick stronger. Yeah, I agree with you. Where like we either could have gone lighter, or we should have made the other Warwick, ideally made the other Warwick changes
Yep.
along with this, because this makes Zach good.
Okay, Draven nerf. I think this is another example of us being a little behind on the meta and not having enough time to truly do some really in-depth sims. But I think this was just like a miss, just whiff completely. Like this, delete this line and the game's in a better state.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, we also nerfed Draven's AD, and so it's like,
Yep.
did we really need to hit a spell too? And at the moment, we felt like it brought him down to like, I remember talking through this, and we like tried it and everything, and it was like the damage between the axe and the normal attack was too large, and so we went with a nerf to this direction. But maybe we didn't even need to do it.
Yeah,
so.
I think if you look at where Draven is now compared to like Sivir and even like Jhin post B patch, delete this line and the game's in a better spot.
Yeah.
Double up changes. These have been good, other than the oops, we broke Mercenary for a half a patch.
Very sad.
So that was not great. Team obviously felt quite bad about that. But the reinforcement seems to be good. The player damage seems to be good. And now that it's fixed, Mercenary seems to still be strong, but not like obviously overwhelmingly broken strong. So cool.
Yeah.
And then augments and bug fixes. Sweet. So that was it. And then obviously, like I said, we shipped 12.6 and we saw the dominant strategies be Arcanist at the end game with the best ceiling, but at low elo, the best way to play was the Warwick and Sivir builds. It was like, get your Sivir 1/6 Hextech or force Warwick, grab some bows. Robin had that infamous tweet where it's like all 8 players gathered around the one bow on the opening carousel. Not great. So where we ended up, despite all that. So we shipped a B patch. So let's talk about the B patch real quick. Again, smoke bomb changes. This is where, again, I'm just super negative on these changes. I feel like it's done nothing. So
I think it helps, but because like this is a lot of hidden power. I think that the part I don't like about nerfing this is that it's like this whole mechanic is not very clear to the player, like how it works. It's like a mechanic that's not available in any other part of our game, and so and it's like in the tooltip, it's like it's described as best as we can, but it's also kind of confusing, especially if you're not like a super veteran player. So that's kind of why I don't like using that as a balance lever. But I think it does help.
Yep. Twitch nerf. Believe it or not, as much as I hate Twitch, I really hate Twitch. As a player, I wish that champion didn't exist. I think this was an over nerf. I think this combined with Chemtech and Twitch was already starting to get balanced. I think this was an over nerf.
I disagree. I think Twitch is still really good, and so like I might be me not having, I guess I don't know. Maybe my read is wrong, but like my current read on the meta before data and everything is just that like Twitch is still pretty good, especially for like a one cost in the late game. So
you'll have to let me know Monday when you get the real data back. I'm definitely curious where Twitch ended up post B patch and everything. But like I said, my read is that this might have been an over nerf. So. Talon, I think this change seems to have been fine. 2-star Talon, early Talon still gets you through the early game very well. 2-star Talon still good. We didn't over nerf 3-star. The one thing I'll say is we added this like Blade's Edge bleed bonus duration. That is a number I don't think we should be touching. It's just like, it is what it is. It's part of the identity of VIP. So I don't think that was necessary, but I also don't think it does much harm. It's just like an unnecessary patch line.
Yeah, it's mainly that like Talon can easily burn through tanks because of how many times he can stack the thing on top of each other. And also sometimes he gets like one stab on a unit and the unit just like Talon dies and the unit bleeds to death because it lasted so long. And so it's mainly to address those types of situations where Talon is that it's very niche. It's a niche nerf, but it hits some scenarios where it could be really frustrating for the opposing player.
Okay.
Yeah.
Warwick. Go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, but I don't think that actually like did much in terms of nerfing Talon. I think the other thing did a lot more, and I think it was a good nerf.
Okay, let's talk Warwick. So Warwick, real quick, we nerfed his attack speed, and there's a Chem Tech nerf, and there's a Challenger nerf in here. So we hit 3 angles. So I think it was very interesting watching the player reception to this, because first off, there was the reaction of, you nerfed 3 things, therefore you must be killing him. Then the B patch released. Then there was the wave of, Warwick is still winning my lobbies. These riders don't know how to do their job. Then there was the, okay, it's been 24 hours and data sites are finally starting to update. And all of a sudden, Warwick looks really bad in the data. And he's still winning lobbies. So, like, I'm still seeing Reddit posts where it's like, Warwick is still unbeatable, this is dumb. But data shows him as kind of trash tier right now. So, I think the actual answer might be, and here's the controversial take, it might be where it's supposed to be now.
Yeah, so like in the times when people get a good situation, should play Warwick, early 2-star Warwick, good augments, everything.
Yep.
They win the game. Great. Like, good. You can play this comp. But if you're like forcing it all the time, then, you're going to go bot 4. And that's kind of where we want the comp to be anyways. And so I think that landed, if that's true, all of that's like staying like this until the next patch, Warwick's in a good spot.
Yeah. The one thing I will say that is missing, though, is I do think Tryndamere 3 is still disappointing compared to other 3-cost champions. And so I think that is the bit of a miss here. But, again, when I look at that Warwick composition that people were forcing, it might finally be correct.
Yeah, there's a couple things for that Tryndamere thing. Basically, like, the whole goal of this B patch was to like address the things that are very outstanding. And we were going to take our time to like buff up the things that need the love to like shine, and Tryndamere didn't seem that like high priority of like he's gonna be so bad that we needed to put him into the like B patch and kind of break the convention that or like the goals that we were going for at that time. But ultimately, yes, I think Tryndamere landed in a weaker spot than we wanted.
Cool. Lucian, I think Lucian's actually perfect. I think he's fine. I have no issues with Lucian. Sharpshooter Lucian's still a little strong, but that's the augment. Base Lucian seems actually quite okay.
Yeah, seems good.
Draven buff. I think this is another balance thrashing thing where the real answer is he might need even a little more. I'm still seeing Draven suffer compared to the Jins and Sivirs out there. But I think Draven, at least it was a buff, which is good. I think he might need more. And I know we don't have one in the next patch, so maybe you guys patch it next week if the data comes back. But that's where I kind of see Draven right now. Is like it's good at least.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure on this Draven thing yet, so I don't have a good read yet. But we'll take a look at data next week for sure on that.
Okay, Jin. Let's talk Jin. I want to talk about this one because I have a lot of thoughts here. So as we said, 12.7 is the Worlds patch, right? We need to get all these things in a good spot in the Worlds patch. And with Jin, there were many players, not all, a few level-headed players weren't saying this, but a few exaggeratory players were saying Jin is unplayable and needs a buff. Now, we had an option here. We could go 0 out of 60, and then if it turned out he was still unplayable, go 0 out of 50, and then all of a sudden we'd be out of time and it's Worlds patch, and if that was a bad spot, we'd be screwed. So we ended up doing kind of a binary search trick that designers can do sometimes, which is we overbuffed him intentionally a little. We put him at 0 out of 50 to get a read on what this does to him. And so we'll get the data back. I know initial reactions were, oh my god, he's wildly OP. Question if that's actually how it's playing out right now. We're still seeing Sivir be much more desired, especially on the China Super server, than we are Jin. So maybe this was okay. But we've actually already got a 0 out of 60 in the next patch, just in case that it turned out to be too much. so that he ends up right where he should be for Worlds. I think it's a little devious of us to do it that way, but I think it was the correct call, and I'm glad we did it that way.
Yeah, and all the initial reactions came from like not even experiencing the game yet. It was just looking at the buff and being like, "Oh my god, he's gonna be OP." And then like when you go into your first game, it's like, "Oh my god, Jin is top 4ing. He's OP." So,
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he definitely landed in a good spot though, or like in a strong spot though. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for the spicy one? Because you and I were already debating this before we even started pressing record, because you and I have different camps on this one.
Yeah, we had a small conversation. And we were like, "Ah, crap, we should have just recorded that because like we already talked about this thing that's."
Yep. So let's talk Sivir.
Let's go.
I currently believe that Sivir, compared to Jhin, compared to Draven, compared to many of the carries at this spot, is outputting way too much safe DPS. And especially with Hextech able to keep her alive from assassins, and the fact that Kha'Zix isn't that great against. Kha'Zix is like one of the few carries that can take her down, maybe. I believe Sivir is wildly too strong still, as far as like frank DPS output. And I don't believe this change was enough. I think you can definitely argue, like, for balance thrashing, let's not kill Sivir. Cool. But I think this is why we're still seeing Sivir do very well now with the Striker Scrap comp. And I don't know. I feel like we needed to hit the number of bounces. But, like I said, I know you disagree. So,
yeah. And also, just to be fair, I think we hadn't seen that, like, this power of scrap mid game until more recently, like a China development where they, like, figured out that if you put this together with Sivir, instead of using Hextech for defenses, you use Scrap for defenses, and she's very strong. And the comp flows very nicely because of its cost curve. But, like, basically, by nerfing the number of bounces on Sivir, that was another direction we were going, like, debating. It nerfs her extremely harshly and kind of really takes away from her, like, unique identity. We went with a different direction of, like, nerfing Hextech and then her attack speed, which just overall nerfs her DPS and also hits that, like, the damage that she outputs in a way that's more manageable. Whereas, like, if we go from 4 to 3, it's a definite amount. Whereas, you know, if we adjust the number of on-hit damage, it much more flexible for us. Yep. But I think my take basically is that, like, Hextech Sivir is still playable, and then Sivir Striker could be too strong, but, like, we didn't want to also gut Sivir and make it so that, like, that other patch where we nerfed Hextech, where, like, you just don't touch Sivir anymore. Yeah. And so that's why she landed like this.
And in case this is like one of your first time watching one of these patch post mortems or something like that, these disagreements are healthy on a team. There is no right or wrong answer. I look at game balance more like science and trying, experiments. It's like we're trying to find the right answer. Experimentation is good. And so this isn't like if Kent's right, Mort's a bad designer, or vice versa. It's like we had a hypothesis, we tried it, we tested it, we got new information, and now we do a new hypothesis. Just to be clear, even though we disagree, that is healthy.
So next patch, Sivir 3 hex range, right, Mort?
I mean,
you said too much safe DPS, so we just moved her forward.
See, that's at least a spicy conversation worth having. I think players would hate it, but from a balance perspective, that might be correct.
Yeah, and I also bring it up because I know Mort hates whole.
Well, it's not that I hate them; it's that I believe it makes players hate them because they're too hard to play.
Yeah.
So
I think there's something longer discussion for the future. I think I like 3 hex units. I think we need to do more work to make it playable, but longer discussion for the future when we actually print more of them. So.
Yep. All right, let's power through this. Arcanist -10 at 4, 6, and 8. I think it's fine. Little worried it might have been overkill, but overall it seems to be landing okay. We're still seeing Arcanist comps do okay, so I'm not like seeing them as S tier, but like they're doing well.
Yeah, and they still have a really high cap in Victor because Victor is still really good. So, yeah, I think it was good.
Yep. Chemtech, we already talked about a bit. This is just a slam dunk change. We should have made it a while ago. It's a good change.
Yeah, I agree.
Challenger change. This one's a little trickier. I think this was correct. The one that scares me a little is like 6 Challenger. 6 Challenger is actually pretty hard to put together a lot. Like you need an Augment and a Draven or like some really good high rolls. I feel like 6 might have been a bit of an over nerf here, but I know 6 was also very, very strong. So
yeah, and just to give it a little bit of context, basically we're targeting that like the Warwick capped comp. You go Challenger always over the 5 Chem Tech if you can, and it's just really powerful because your Quinn dishes out 1,000,000 damage.
Yep.
And so I think this is good. I don't have a really great read on it yet either, but
Yep.
It's still
yeah.
It seems like a good change. Warwick landed in a much better spot, so the target was correct.
Yep. And then finally, the Hextech change, and this kind of goes back to the Sivir conversation. Like I said, my vote would have been actually this was a little harsh, and Sivir should have been where we hit harder, not Hextech. And the reason I believe that is like we're not seeing 6 Hextech Lucian comps or anything like that. But let's wait and see the data and see if that actually ends up being the case, right? If 6 Hextech is still doing just fine with Sivir, maybe it was fine.
Yep.
I do think like 6 Hextech was very strong though, and so I think again if we have to binary search this and rebuff it by 5 next patch, maybe. So the other thing I'll say is that like the jump from 4 to 6 as I looked at these numbers was really big, and so I almost wonder if there's a bit of like nerf just 6 if we have to go further at some point.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the reasoning is that like for all the players, basically, like you can access 4 at the beginning of the game. You can't access 6 because you need a 4 cost to turn it on. And like if you hit it on stage 2, you just super high rolled it, and so that's why the number is so high. But yeah, I agree. Like the jump is pretty jarring.
Yeah, if you can get that level 5 Sivir plus Hextech heart though, whew.
I know. Yeah.
So, all right. So that's gonna do it. Like I said, I think it's interesting because if you look back at what we talked about, there were some clear slam dunks, like the Malzahar change, and then there were some clear misses, and then there's some debatable ones that are like, we're still not even sure if they were like misses or hits because game balance is hard, and then when you mix them all up, it's like, well, was this change good in context of this change? Whee!
Yep.
Turns out adding augments to the game made it even infinitely more complex.
Yes, another axis that we have to consider with every change that we make, and how that influences other comps also. So,
but despite what Reddit says, and as harder as it made our job, it also made the game more freaking fun, and that's what matters. So,
yeah, more work to do on augments, but like the addition of augments was in no way a bad thing because the game is in a much better, like way more fun.
Yep. All right, that's our post-mortem for 12.6 and 12.6b. Like I said, like being open. If you have any thoughts, you like this video, let us know. If not, tell us to stop doing them. We'll take our Friday nights back. No skin off our back, So
if you want Sivir to be 3 range, let us know down below so I can have more strength in my argument against Mort.
Perfect. Yep. All right, don't forget to like and subscribe. No, I'm just kidding. All right, I think that's gonna do it for us. Oh, you gonna show them the thing?
Sign? Oh yeah, let me.
You gonna do the thing? They can see it.
Yeah, so we can do a Mortdog hand signal. It's the M.
Oh
so
my
like,
God. It's never gonna catch on. It's never
so
gonna catch on.
Like, Mort is. We need to give him a shirt that has like the M on it, so that he's not wearing his like. It's his logo, but like it's a hand logo. Yeah.
Anyways, awesome. All right, that's gonna do it for us. Until next time, as always, enjoy TFT and take it easy.